works in 30 minutes. The economy works like a simple machine, but many people don't understand it, or they don't agree on how it works. And this is the latter out of this leaderless economy suffering. I feel a deep sense of responsibility to share my simple but practical economy template. Though it's unconventional, it's helped me to anticipate and to sidestep for a global financial crisis. And it has worked well for me for about 30 years. Let's begin. Though the economy might seem complex, it works in a simple mechanical way. It's made up of a few simple parts and a lot of simple transactions that are repeated over and over again jillion times. These transactions are above all else driven by human nature, and they create three main forces that drive the economy. Number one, productivity growth. Number two, the short-term debt cycle. Number three, the long-term debt cycle. We'll look at these three forces and how living them on top of each other creates a good template for tracking economy movements and figuring out what's happening now. Let's start with the simplest part of economy, transactions. An economy is simply the sum of the transactions that make it up, and this transaction is a very simple thing. You make transactions all the time. Every time you buy something, you create a transaction. Each transaction consists of buyer exchanging money or credit with the seller for goods, services, or financial assets. Credit spent just like money, so adding together the money spent and the amount of credit spent, you could know the total spending. The total amount of spending drives the economy. If you divide the amount of spent by the quantity sold, you get the price. And that's it. That's a transaction. It's the building block of the economy machine. All cycles in the process in an economy are driven by transaction. So if we understand transactions, we can understand the whole economy. A market consists of all the buyers and all the sellers making transactions for the same thing. For example, there is a wheat market, a car market, a stock market, a market for millions of things. An economy consists of all the transactions in all of each market. If you add the total spending and total quantity sold in all the markets, that's everything you need to know to understand the economy. It's just as simple. People, businesses, banks, and governments all engage in transactions the way I just described, exchanging money and credit for goods, services, and financial assets. The biggest buyer and seller is the government, which consists of two important parts. A central government that collects taxes and spends money, and central bank, which is different from other buyers and sellers because it controls the amount of money and credit in the economy. It does this by creating influencing interest rate and printing new money. For these reasons as wealthy, the central bank is an important player in the pure flow of credit. I want you to pay attention to credit. Credit is the most important part of the economy and probably the least understood. It's the most important part because it's biggest and most vulnerable part. Just like buyers and sellers go to market to make transactions, so do lenders and borrowers. Lenders usually want to make their money into more money, and borrowers usually want to buy something they can afford, like a house or a car. Or they want to invest in something like a starting business. Credit can help both lenders and borrowers get what they want. The borrowers promise to repay this amount they borrow, called principal, plus an additional amount called interest. When interest rates are high, there is less borrowing because it's expensive. When interest rates are low, borrowing increases because it's cheaper. When borrowers promise to repay, then lenders believe them, credit is great. Any two people can agree to create credit out of thin air. That seems simple enough. But credit is tricky because it has different names. As soon as credit is created, it immediately turns into debt. Debt is the world an asset to lender and a liability to the borrower. In the future, when the borrower repairs the loan, plus the rest, the asset and the liability disappear, and the transaction is settled. So why credit is so important? Because when a borrower receives credit, he is able to increase his spending. And remember, spending drives the economy. This is because a person's spending is another person's income. Think about it. Every dollar you spend someone else on, and every dollar you earn, someone else has spent. So when you spend more, someone else earns more. When someone's income rise, it makes the renters more willing to lend him money because he is worthy of credit. A credit-worthy borrower has two things: the ability to repay it and collateral. Having a lot of income in relation to his debt gives him the ability to repay. In the event that he can't repay, he has valuable debt to use collateral that can be sold. This makes lenders appear comfortable lending him money. So increases income allows increases borrowing, which allows increases spending, and since one person's spending is another person's income, this leads to more increased borrowing, and so on. But this self-enforcing pattern leads to economic growth and is why we have cycles. In a transaction, you have to give something in order to get something. And how much you get depends on how much you produce. Over time, we learn, and that accumulated knowledge raises our living standard. We call this productivity growth. Those who are inventive and hardworking raises their productivity and their living standards faster than those who are complacent and lazy. But that is necessary true over the short run. Productivity matters most in the long run, but credit matters most in the short run. This is because productivity growth doesn't fluctuate much, so it's not a big driver of economic swings. That is because it allows us to consume more than we produce when required, and it processes as the constant less than we produce when you have to pay it back. Debt swings occur in two big cycles. One takes about 5 8 years, and the other takes about 75 to 100 years. For most people, the swings, they typically don't see the cycles because they see them to cross day by day, week by week. In this chapter, we are going to step back and look at these three big processes and how they interact to make up our experience. As mentioned, swings around and around to how much innovation or hard work there is. There is primarily due to how much credit there is. Let's for a second imagine an economy without credit. In this economy, the only way I can increase my spending is to increase my income, which require me to be more productive and do more work. Increases productivity is the only way for growth. Since my spending is another person's income, the economy grows every time I or anyone else is more productive. If you follow the transactions and play this out, we see progression like the productivity go right. But because we borrow, we have cycles. This isn't due to any law in regulation. It's due to human nature and the way the credit works. Think of borrowing as simply a way of pulling spending forward. In order to buy something you can't afford, you need to spend more than you make. To do this, you essentially need to borrow from your future self. In doing so, you create a time in the future, then you need to spend less than you make in order to pay back. A better quickly resembles our cycles. Basically, anytime you borrow, you create a cycle. This is as true for individual as it is for the economy. This is why understanding credit is so important because it sets into motion a mechanical, productive moves series of events that will happen in the future. This makes credit different from money. Money is when you settle transactions well. When you buy a beer from a bartender with cash, the transaction is settled immediately. But when you buy beer with credit, it's like starting a barter. You're saying you promise to pay in the future. Together, you and bartender create the asset and a liability. You just create the credit out of thin air. It's not until you pay the bartender, then the asset and the liability disappear. The debt goes away and the transaction is settled. The reality is that most of what people call money is actually credit. The total amount of credit in the United States is about $50 trillion, and the total amount of money is only about $3 trillion. Remember, in an economy without credit, The only way to increase your spending is to produce more. But in the economy with credit, you can also increase your spending by borrowing. As a result, an economy with credit has more spending and allows incomes to rise faster and productivity over the short run, but not over the long run. Not don't get me wrong. Credit is not necessarily something bad that just causes cycles. It's bad when finance is overconsumption that can be paid back. However, it's good and informational allocates resource and produce income so you can pay back to them. For example, if you borrow money to buy a big TV, if it doesn't generate income for you to pay back to them. But if you borrow money to buy a tractor and the tractor lets you harvest more crops and earn more money, then you can pay back your debt and improve your living standard. In an economy with credit, you can follow the transactions and see how credit creates growth. Then let me give you an example. Suppose you earn $100,000 a year and have no debt. You are credit worthy enough to borrow $10,000, say on a credit card. So you can spend $110,000 even though you only earn $100,000. Since your spending is another person's income, someone is earning $110,000. The person is earning $110,000 with debt can borrow $11,000. So it can be spent $121,000 even though he has only earned $110,000. His spending is another person's income, and by following the transactions, we can begin to see how this process works in a self-reinforcing pattern. But remember, borrowing created cycles, and if the cycle goes up, it eventually needs to come down. This leads us into short-term debt cycle. As economic activity increases with an expansion, the first phase faced the short-term debt cycle. Spending continued increases and prices start to rise. This happens because increases in spending is fueled by credit, which can be created instantly out of thin air. When the amount of spending that comes grow faster than the production of goods, prices rise. When prices rise, we call this inflation. The central bank doesn't want to match too much inflation because it causes problems. Seeing prices rise, it raises interest rate. With higher interest rate, fewer people can afford to borrow money, and the cost of existing debt rise. Think about this as monthly payments on your credit card going up. Because people borrow less and have higher debt repayments, they have less money left over spend. So spending slow. And since one person's spending is more another person's income, incomes drop, and so on and so forth. And when people spend less, prices go down. We call this deflation. Economic activity decreases and we have a recession. If the recession becomes the severe and inflation is no longer a problem, the central bank will lower interest rates to cause everything to pick up again. With low interest rates, then repayments are reduced and borrowing and spending pick up. And you see another expansion. As we can see, the economy works like a machine. In the short-term debt cycle, spending is constrained only by willingness of lenders and borrowers to provide and receive credit. When credit is easily available, there is not an economic expansion. When credit is not easily available, there is a recession. And note that this cycle is controlled primarily by the central bank. The short-term debt cycle typically lasts 5 to 8 years and happens over and over again for decades. Notice that the bottom and top of each cycle finish with more growth in the previous cycle and with more debt. Why? Because people perceive it. They are in a position to borrow and spend more instead of paying back debt. It's human nature. Because of this, over long periods of time, debt rises faster than incomes, create the long-term debt cycle. Despite people becoming more random, lenders even more extend credit. Why? Because everyone thinks things are going great. People are just focused on what's been happening lately. And what's been happening lately? Incomes have been rising. Asset values are growing up. The stock market rose. It's a boom. We pay to buy goods, services, and financial assets. We borrow money. When people do a lot of what that, we call it bubble. So even though they have been growing incomes have been growing near as fast upside down. Let's call the ratio of debt to income the debt burden. So long as income continues to rise, the debt burden stays manageable. At the same time, asset value soar. People borrow huge amounts of money to buy assets investments, causing their prices to rise even higher. People feel wealthy. So even with the accumulation of a lot of debt, rising incomes that asset value have borrowers remain credit worthy for a long time. But this obviously cannot continue forever and it doesn't. Over decades, debt burden slowly increases, creating larger and larger and debt repayments. At some point, debt repayments started growing faster than incomes, forcing people to cut back on their spending. And since then, person's spending in other person's incomes begin to go down, which makes people less creditworthy, causing borrowing to go down. Debt repayments continue to rise, which makes spending drop even further, and the cycle reverses itself. This is the long-term debt peg. Debt burdens have simply become too big. For the United States, Europe, and to much of the rest of the world, this happened in 2008. It happened for the same reason it happened in Japan in 1989 and in the United States back in 1929. And now the economy begins deleveraging. Deleveraging, people cut spending, incomes fall, credit disappears, asset prices drop, banks get squeezed, the stock market crashes. Social trends rise and whole things start to feed on itself the other way. As income falls and debt repayments rise, borrowers get squeezed. No longer credit drives up, and borrowers can no longer borrow enough money to make their debt repayments. Scrambling to fill the hole, borrowers are forced to sell assets. The rush to sell assets follows the market at the same time as spending falls. This is when the stock market collapses. The real estate market tanks and banks get into trouble. As the prices drop, the value of the collateral borrowers can put up drops. This makes borrower even has less credit worth. People are credit rapidly disappear. Less spending, less income, less worth, less credit, less borrowing, and so on. It's a vicious cycle. This appears similar to a recession, but the difference here is that interest rate can be lowered to save the debt. In a recession, lowering interest rates works to stimulate borrowing. However, in a deleveraging, lowering interest rates does not work because interest rates are already low and soon hit 0%, so the stimulation ends. Interest rates in the United States hit 0% during the deleveraging 1930 and again in 2008. The difference between a recession and a deleveraging is that in deleveraging, borrowers' debt burdens have simply gotten too big and can be relieved by lowering interest rates. Lenders realize that debt have become too large to able to fully pay back. Borrowers have lost their ability to repay and their collateral has lost value. They feel crippled by the debt. They don't even know more. Lenders stop lending, borrowers stop borrowing. Think of the economy as being not creditworthy, just like an individual. So, what do you do about the leverage? The problem is that burdens are too high to it. They must come down. There are four ways this can happen. 1. People, business, and governments cut their spending. 2. Debts are reduced through defaults and restructuring. 3. Wealthy is filtering from the haves to have-nots. And finally, 4. The central bank prints out new money. These four ways have happened in hybrid leveraging in modern history. Usually, spending is cut first, As we just saw, business and the government tighten their belts and cut their spending so that they can pay down their debt. This is often referred to as sturdily. When borrowers stop taking on new debt and start paying down old debt, you might expect your debt burden to decrease. But the opposite happens because spending is cut, and one man's spending is another man's income. It causes incomes portfolio. They forecast that them deficit pride and their burdens actually get worse. As we've seen, this cost spending is disproportionately and painful. Businesses are forced to cut costs, which means less jobs and higher employment. This leads to the next step that must reduce. Many people find themselves unable to repay their loans and borrowers debt on lenders' assets. When a borrower does repay the bank, people get nervous that the bank won't be able to repay them, so they ask them to withdraw their money from the bank. Banks get squeezed and business and banks default on their debt. This service economy contraction is a deflation. A big part of the deflation is people discovering much of what they were really there. Let's go back to the bar. When you bought a beer and poured in a bottle, you promised to repay the bartender. Your promise became answer of the bartender. But if you break your promise, if you don't pay him back, you necessarily default on your bartender, then I said he has reason to really worth anything. It has basically disappeared. Many lenders don't work their asset to disappear and agree to debt restructuring. Debt restructuring means lenders get paid back less or get paid back over a longer time frame, over lower interest rate than was first agreed. Somehow a contract is broken in a way that induces debt. Lenders would rather have a rate of something than of nothing, even though debt disappears. The restructuring causes income and asset values to disappear faster, so that the debt burden continues to get worse. Like cutting spending, the reduction is also painful and deflationary. All of this impacts the central government because lower incomes and less employment means the government collects fewer taxes. At the same time, it needs to increase its spending because employment has arisen. Many of the employed have indicated savings and need financial support from the government. Additionally, governments created stimulus plan and increases their spending to make up for the decreases in the economy. Government's budget deficits explode in the leverage because they spending more than they earn in taxes. This is what's happening when you hear about the budget deficit on the news. To fund their deficits, governments need to either raise taxes or borrow money. But with incomes falling in so many for the unemployed, who is the money going to come from? The rich. It is the government the more money since it concentrated in the hands of a small percentage of the people. Government naturally raises taxes on the wealthy, which partially reduces distribution of the wealth in the economy, from the haves to have the have-nots. But have-nots who are suffering begin to resent the wealthy haves. The wealthy haves begin squeezed by the weak economy, falling asset prices, and higher taxes, begin to resent the have-nots. If the depression continues, sure disorder can break out. Not only to the tension rise between countries, they can rise between countries, especially very incredible countries. This situation can lead to political change that can sometimes be extreme. In the 90s century, this led to Hitler coming to power, war in Europe, and depression in the United States. The pressure to do something to end the depression increases. Remember, most of what people thought was money was actually credit. So when credit disappears, people don't have enough money. People are despair for money, and you remember who can print money? The central bank can. Having already lowered its interest rates to near zero is proceeded to print money. Unlike current spending, the reduction and with reduced distribution, printing money is inspirationally and stimulus. Inevitably, the central bank prints new money out of thin air and uses it to buy financial assets and government bonds. It happens in the news instant during the Great Depression and again in 2008 when United States Central Bank, the Federal Reserve, print over $2 trillion. Other central banks around the world that could print a lot of money too. By buying financial assets with this money, it helps drive up asset prices, which makes people more creditworthy. However, this only helps those who own financial assets. You see, the central bank can print money, but it can only buy financial assets. The central government in town can buy good services and put money in the hands of the people, but it can't print money. So in order to stimulate the economy, they must cooperate it. By buying government bonds and central bank essential raise more money to government, allowing it to run a deficit, and increases spending on goods and services through its stimulus programs and employment benefits. This increases benefits incomes preferred incomes as well as the government's debt. However, it will lower the economy total debt burden. This is very risky time. Policymakers need to balance the four ways that debt burdens come down. The deflationary waves need to balance with the inflationary waves to ensure border maintain stability. To balance correctly, there can be a beautiful deleveraging. You see, deleveraging can be ugly or it can be beautiful. How can I deleveraging be beautiful? Even though deleveraging is a difficult situation, handling a difficult situation in the best part before waves beautiful, rather more beautiful than the depth of unbalanced excesses and the leveraging pace. In a beautiful leveraging, debt decline relative to income. Real economy growth is positive and inflation is still a problem. It is achieved by having the right balance. The right balance requires a certain mix of cutting spending, reducing debt, transferring wealth, and printing money so that economy and social stability can be maintained. People escape printing money will raise inflation. It won't if we accept pulling credit. Remember, spending is what matters. A dollar of spending paid for with money has the same effect on prices as a dollar of spending paid with credit. By printing money, the central bank can make up of the disappear of credit with an increases in the amount of money. In order to turn this around, the central bank is to not promote income growth, but get the rate of income go higher than the rate of interest on the accumulated debt. So what do I mean by that? Basically, income needs to grow faster than debt grows. For example, it's watches someone in the country going through the deleveraging his debt to income ratio of 110%. That means the amount of debt is the same amount of income entire country makes in a year. Now think about the interest rate on that. Let's say it's 2%. If they were growing is 2% because of that interest rate income only growing at around 1%, you will never reduce the debt burden. You need to print enough money to get the rate of income grow above the rate of interest. However, printing money could easily be obviously because it's so easy to do and people offer it to the alternative. The key is avoid printing too much money and causing a considerably high inflation to when Germany did during its deleveraging in the 1920s. Each policymaker achieved the right balance. A deleveraging is so dramatic. Growth is slow, but debt burdens go down. That's beautiful deleveraging. When incomes begin to rise, borrower begins to appear more creditworthy. And when borrowers appear more creditworthy, lenders begin to lend money again. Debt burdens finally begin to fall. Able to borrow money, people can spend more. Eventually, the economy begins to grow again, leading to a reparation portion of the long-term debt cycle. Though the leveraging process can be horrible if handled badly, if handled well, it will eventually fix the problem. It takes roughly a decade or more for the burdens of economic activity to get back to normal, perhaps the term lost decade. In closing, Of course, the economy is a little bit more complicated than this template suggests. However, the short-term debt cycle on of the long-term debt cycle and then the rate for top proactively go right. Give us a reasonably good template for saying where we've been, where we are now, and where we are probably ahead. So in summary, there are three rules of term that I'd like you to take away from this. First, don't have to rise faster than income because your debt and burdens will eventually crush you. Second, don't have income rise faster than productivity because you will eventually become uncomfortable. And third, you do all that you can to raise your productivity because in the long run, that's what matters most. This is a simple advice for you and it is simple advice for policymaker. You might be surprised, but most people, including most policymakers, don't pay enough attention to this. This template has worked for me and I hope it will work for you. Thank you.